Our next speaker is Professor Yaser Abu-Mostafa. Professor here is Caltech. He was honored with so many prizes, so probably will not have time to even list them today. But I just want to share that Shuki was a graduate student in Stanford when he first met Yaser at Caltech. At that time, Yaser was a co-founder and co-chair of technical program committee of a conference, which is called NeurIPS right now. So Shuki had a paper in this conference, and he kind of attended the conference, and they met during the conference. So since then, Shuki became close to Caltech, and Yaser being the connection, and Shuki was visiting to work on neural networks and harmonic analysis. So Yaser actually was the chair of the search committee that hired Shuki. Welcome, Yaser.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So when Shuki asked me to give this talk, I was very honored. I was very happy. Shuki is a very dear friend, close to my heart. I'm very proud of him, so it was an easy thing to do. And then this week I decided it might be a good idea to actually prepare the talk. So I've given many, many talks in my life, but this is absolutely the first time in my life I give a non-technical talk. So what do? So I did what any responsible person would do. I asked ChatGPT. So comes back the answer, what do you do in a retirement party? And I realized I was in trouble because the answers really did not fit. So when you talk in a retirement party, the first thing to emphasize is that the person can now do what they enjoy. Excuse me, we have been doing what we enjoy all our life. That's not it. And then the other thing is that, okay, there was a body of work and it's done and you should be proud of it and move on. Again, excuse me, we are not moving on. My money is on the table, that there will be great results coming from this young man forever and ever and ever. It's just the nature of things. So it's a transition. So I decided to do this on my own and not depend on AI. Never depend on AI, by the way. AI is a bad, it's not a good idea. So I decided, let me tell the story and celebrate the person. And I'm going to talk about two aspects of the person that are equally important to me. One of them is the human, and the other one is the scientist. So let me start with the story. As was mentioned, this is how it started. I got this memo. Obviously, there was a talk before it. And now there is a committee to search for a new professor in CNS. Computational Neural System was a new field at that time. It was a merger between biology and engineering in order to deal with neural networks, both from the engineering point of view and the biological point of view. And if you are familiar with the faculty in biology and the faculty of engineering, these are completely different cultures. It was very difficult to agree on anything, okay? And now we have to hire this new person that satisfies both of them. And John Seinfeld asked me to chair this, and I started talking to people. And one of the things that you want to avoid when you have an interdisciplinary things, let's say biology and engineering in this case, is to have someone where the biologists think he's a great engineer, and the engineers think he's a great biologist. Because that's a very good compromise, and everybody will be happy. You have to go for the actual substance, okay? And what I did when I got this, I talked to John Seinfeld. I told him I only one condition, okay? We never lose the position. If it takes me 5 years to find the person, the position stays. And he promised, the position is yours, okay? So now there is no compromise. If we go for the first year and we don't find it, we move on and on and on. Okay. And as you see, sort of some of the names in the committee you recognize. It was a very interesting committee. It was a very interesting discussion. We had interviews with great people. And it took 3 full years to find this fellow. Okay. And at the end of the day, we have the arrival of a new colleague 4 years later. 3 years search and then a year until the appointment starts. Okay. So we arrived at Caltech, and we have been, we knew each other from before, but now we are friends, and now we are really, really close friends to a level that is very difficult to replicate. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to describe in a nutshell the two aspects that I talked about, the human and the scientist. And then I will go through it, piece by piece. Here is how I describe the humanity of Shuki. This is not a joke. This characterizes him genuinely. He's an optimistic person. He sees the good things in life. He wants others to smile. And it's a very consistent theme. And if you allow me, I will actually try to analyze that. Going back to an event that happened in his early youth, he was seriously injured. And he probably had time to think that my life could be completely miserable. I may not be able to walk, I may not be able to do this, and for a young person, that's a horror. And it took time, and he recovered. And my feeling is that that event was a blessing in disguise, because it gave him a perspective that never was shaken through his life. Life is good. Life is good for the simple pleasures. Life is good for all the positive things that happen. And that is reflected in everything he does. And that also developed a very interesting mix in his personality, a mixture of empathy and no nonsense. Very nice balance. So he's empathetic because he was at the situation where things were absolutely terrible. He could see people in a terrible situation and sympathize with them. But it's not a question of just generic empathy. It's actually, there are things to be done, they have to be done right, and this is the way to go forward. And you can see it in all of his interactions. And obviously, when I will talk about some examples of that, but indeed, when I look at this smile, it just gives me such a great feeling, and it's a constant, it's something you can rely to, and many people who dealt with Shuki will know that. Okay, so that's the human part. So let me talk about the scientist in a nutshell, again, before I go into some detail. Okay. So here is my analysis of scientific research in general. There are two coordinates. One of them is the imagination, the crazy ideas. Okay? The other one is technical, the ability to do something and make it rigorously, go to the conclusion and make a contribution that is deep and whatnot. And if you look at these two coordinates and you look at your colleagues at Caltech, everybody has their angle. So here's one coordinate, here's the other coordinate, and okay. And in some sense, you don't want to go too much into one extreme or the other. If you go into the imaginative guy, you become all over the place, you become a hit-and-run scientist. Nothing really happens, but you have all of these great ideas. If you go in the other one, you will be pumping papers like there is no tomorrow, but it becomes boring. So now the question is, what to do in between. And it happens to be natural to Shuki that he is at 45 degrees. Okay? So everybody thinks, what is my degree? Okay? And that's an interesting one. And it completely comes natural. He has the completely solid and rigorous approach, and he also has the imagination, and you can see it in the work. Okay? Every project is different. Every project is in a different field. Okay? So these are the two sort of ways of me understanding Shuki, the person, and the scientist. So let me go through some snapshots of the humanity, and then I will go through some snapshots of the science. Now, it was difficult for me to do the snapshots of the humanity because, in all honesty, I didn't want to embarrass the people on the receiving end of that humanity. All right? So I sort of chose, okay, I will give just two examples. But for the first group of people, I am very happy to embarrass them. This is the Shuki family when I met them, okay? So I trust that Orangal must be older than this now, okay? No, of course, I know them very well, okay? But this is the family that I met, okay? And, when you talk about being a family man or a parent and whatnot, everybody loves their children. Everybody will do everything they can in their children. But there is an added aspect that I observed Shuki in his family. And the fact that he is very wise, okay? So when he raised his children, he understood what are the pluses, what are the minuses, what are the challenges, and he would do things very methodically, very thoughtfully, based on love and all of that, but it was parenting like I have seldom seen before. And in all honesty, I have a soft spot for good parenting, regardless of who the parents are, okay? And Shuki and Annette make me melt in that regard. So here's the family, and most of you have met the family, and they're wonderful children, very successful, a doctor and a lawyer, and it's a great story. But the other aspect is that family is not only your wife and children. Family is your parents, something that is often forgotten. And when it comes to parents, Shuki and Annette were unbelievably good to their parents. And I very much relate to that. We share a culture that is extremely common. We have the same value system. We talk eye to eye. We understand exactly how we feel. And the dedication to the parents when the time comes to help them out rather than being helped out by them was absolute priority. And even if that resulted in compromising other things that we would love to do and we have to do, we never gave that a lower priority. And that I appreciate very, very much. Now, the second example of humanity that I'm going to give, I am going to give it cryptically, and again, in order to protect the innocent. And everybody helps people. You try to be good to your advisees. I mean, there are certain things that are great, but you expect. What catches my attention always is that when people work against their own self-interest for a cause, that really catches my attention. And this is one event. Shuki got to know a student at Caltech, not to be named, and the student was accused of something that is pretty serious. And there was a process in order to punish the student, and it would have really derailed his future. And Shuki, through his experience, Shuki is a very good reader of people. When we interviewed students, I would ask him to interview the prospective student, and he would ask me to interview the prospective student because our gut feeling about what the student is was very reliable. So that was a very important input. So he could read the situation, and he decided in his heart of hearts that the accusation is false. Now, I don't care whether the accusation is false or true. What I care about is that Shuki believed that it was false and decided to stand for the student. And he didn't do that at no expense, because there are many people at Caltech at that point who were against the student in the sense that they thought that he should be punished. And in the course of defending the student, no question that Shuki lost political capital and lost favor with key people at Caltech. But he still did it. And I still see the situation that I referred to at the beginning of the talk. He can understand when someone is in a tough spot, but otherwise is a talented, promising person, and all you need to do is just take them out of that situation, and then they will flourish and take off. He's willing to invest his own capital in doing that because he values that. And whenever I look at people, everybody works in the self-interest. It's natural. That's how we are. Okay? But if you look at the people you will see that there are some people who work only in their self-interest, no other consideration. And then there are people where there is an angle, there is a light, there is something that makes them go out of that. And definitely your attitude toward them is different. You can see the human part in them. And I have seen plenty of that in Shuki. Okay. So that takes care of the humanity. The rest of it, I mean, there will be lots of students of Shuki that will talk about it and whatnot. There are many examples that I would have loved to talk about, but I could not talk about it that cryptically. But indeed, the human is a huge portion of how I perceive Shuki. But another huge portion, and the reason why he was hired, he wasn't hired because he's a nice human, he was hired because he was a superb scientist. So let me talk about the scientist. So I'm going to sample some of his work, and then I will make a comment at the end. So we'll start with the first thing that was alluded to, which is the paper he presented at NeurIPS. I ran the conference, and I went through the refereeing process, and I was very intrigued about the paper. So I met Shuki for the first time in my life during the conference itself. And I would like to ask you to read the title of this paper, which is almost 40 years old. Okay? That gives you the idea of the insight and the ability of the person to see where the future is. Okay? This was a very nice paper. I know it technically, and I went through it, etc. And from then on, I sort of had him in my mind. And then when the search started, which started much later than that, we went through the sort of the usual suspect, the first year, et cetera, and then it occurred to me that, this is actually a good candidate, and the process started in order to interview him and ending up with the appointment. Okay, so that was a first paper. So you talk about neural networks, and indeed neural networks was at the core of computation and neural systems that the search was about. Here is something in a completely different area, which is error correcting codes. So this is the idea. Again, you will hear everything I say here will be detailed in many of the panel discussions. I'm giving you an overview. So the idea now is that you have 4 disks, and they hold the same information, and you want to make sure that if 2 of them break down, you still can restore the image. Okay? And in this case, for example, you take the first one and the third one are working, the other ones are out of commission, and you still can construct the image. That's a standard error correcting code. This already problem has been solved, but a little bit more computational involved, Reed-Solomon codes. Okay? But the beauty of the work here is that it was done with a very simple operation, just parity stuff. Okay? That can be generalized, that can be, et cetera. And that gave the birth to something else. Instead of dealing with RAID, as in the reliable array of independent disks, you might think of reliable array of independent nodes in general, doing computation. Okay? Same principle, okay? And that turned out to be something that is very influential in Shuki's life. And go on. The title here, which is Computing in the Rain, that's actually the title of the paper. I'm not making this up, okay? And so the idea now is to take these principles and obviously more sophisticated approaches to that. And this was cooperation with Vaskin. I'm pretty sure Vaskin is here. And we ended up with the architecture. The architecture is very flexible. You can add nodes, et cetera. So it's, and it's for distributed computation, this is great because you can now deal with any architecture. And obviously, Shuki noticed the commercial potential in it and had a startup. The startup was called Rainfinity. Okay? And Rainfinity was his first commercial success. It was acquired in 2005, and he had other successes after that. But this was the first one, and usually the first one is very sweet because you don't know what it is, and you are not financially independent until this happens. So it's a big event. So let me also give, in addition to the technical aspect here, give a touch of humanity here because, as startups go, there are all kinds of ups and downs, and investors are pushing you, and you are running out of money, the usual stuff. So there came a time where he had to actually lay off people. That happened. Okay? And I just, you have to do what you have to do, because if you don't lay off people, you lay off everybody. There will be no company. So again, this is the no-nonsense part of it. But the agony that he has gone through in that process was really admirable. We would talk, and he would tell me about it, and he would, because these are people he worked with, but he had to do it, etc. So again, even in the sort of the cutthroat business, this and that, he really had his heart in the right place, trying to do the minimal damage, trying to make them compensated and whatnot in order for the company to survive. And fortunately, the company survived and was acquired and was a success story. Third one, this one is, Lulu will be giving the next talk. So this was an interesting idea. So now we talked about neural networks, as in the stuff that you are using nowadays. We are talking about error correcting codes, a standard field. And now we are talking about DNA computation. So the idea here is the following, okay? Okay, so the brain is the neural network. That's our, the AI assumption. We are trying to imitate the brain all the time. We eventually succeeded. That's remarkable, okay? And the observation here is that, okay, how did the brain come about? Well, it's just DNA doing stuff. So maybe we can cut to the chase and do the computation with DNA. What a great idea. Okay, it looks like a pie in the sky. It wasn't a pie in the sky, okay? So there was a collaboration and idea. So this is a DNA computation actually happening, doing something which has related to the Hopfield network, okay? And this is where you might hear more about it in the next talk, okay? So that's the third one, okay? And then this is a sort of a current one, which is a pretty interesting one. This is, biology, so predicting cancer. So everybody says cancer is very good if you predict it early because then you can treat it. Well, Shuki is trying to predict it so early that he predicted before it starts, okay? And how do you do that? It's okay. So how does cancer happen? Mutations. So there is a particular pattern of mutations, etc. And mutations don't know. It's not like the body wakes in the morning. Let me do all the mutations and become cancerous. No, it happens gradually. So you can measure the mutations and try to predict which ones will lead to a serious level at some point, and that therefore predict where the dangers are and try to preempt or have a preventive thing in time. Okay. And that's a work that I meet trustees every now and then. They come to my office and talk about it, and this is one of the things that they absolutely love. So they talk to him, and they think that this is a great project to have. Okay, so these are just very short highlights of the scientific career, and you will hear more details about it. Let me mention something that is not a paper or not a technical result, but as a scientific contribution in terms of organization, which is the IST initiative. So I was involved in that committee, so I know what happened. Now it's taken for granted, and information is a big deal, and there are all kinds of initiatives, as you can see, that are started independently. But at the time, there was no coherent program that gives information the weight it should be given as a scientific discipline. Unified, expanding different disciplines and whatnot. This was a novel idea at the time, and Shuki, pretty much single-handedly, he put together the committee, obviously, pushed for it, and there are all kinds of stuff. You have to have a coherent story, you have to have the organization, and you have to have the funding. So there was also the funding, and after immense effort for a couple of years, we ended up with a full program. Some of the original guys like CMI and CISL are still around. They are very active centers and whatnot. We had the great funding, and from then on, there were many initiatives along the line of information that are started independently. They fall under the same umbrella of that. So this is definitely his brainchild, and in addition to being his brainchild, he was the first director, the one that takes it off from 0 to 50 miles per hour. And then after that, you can give it to other people, and it takes a life of its own. Okay, so this is my short account of my dear friend Shuki. I'm going to end up with something that he has not seen before. I suspect, well, I don't think any of the committee was here, so I think, no, Carver is here. So Carver is the one who saw it before. Okay, so I'm going to give you confidential information. So here is the disclaimer. First, there has to be a statute of limitation, okay? Especially if it's a retirement party and it's a happy occasion. Especially if the quote, which is confidential, is written by me. I'm not revealing anybody else what they've done. But I am telling you, when I recommended the appointment of Shuki, I wrote a description such that people are convinced that this is a good hire. And I thought to share with you what I thought 32 years ago, something like that, okay? I was right. Thank you, Shuki, and thank you all.